Hi, Jen, and welcome to A Voice and Beyond. It's so lovely to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Now, we were having a little chat a moment ago. You're in Nevada, but over
Mhm.
there, it's Nevada.
Nevada.
Nevada. But
Uh-huh.
most Americans say Nevada as
Yeah.
well, which I find so weird. I thought us Aussies had the accent.
Yeah, they do it too here. I don't know why.
I don't know. Anyway, Jen, you are a certified yoga teacher and a self love coach. You're known as a self-love yogi, and you also have a podcast called the Self-Love Yogi. And we're going to talk about all these different aspects of you. And I'm so excited about having you on the show. There is so much to unpack with you. There are so many layers. And I think we should start with a little bit of a background. If
Okay.
you don't mind sharing your story that has taken you to where you are at right now in your life. But if we can start with you, Jen, as a child and what you experienced as a child.
I'm gonna do my best to condense that so it's a little bit
Yes.
short, the shorter version.
Okay.
But my childhood was very traumatic. I grew up in a very chaotic environment. My parents divorced when I was 3, and my mom was a very serious drug addict. And my sister and I lived with her until I was about 10, and my sister stayed with her until she was about 15. And there were just a lot of men in my house. There was a lot of moving. I went to 3 different elementary schools. There was a time at one point where the cops came in the middle of the night and took my mom away because she got caught doctor hopping. So she was going to different doctors and getting pills, and they caught her and they came and took her to jail. And just a lot of that kind of stuff. Anybody who's grown up around drugs knows what it's like. There's just a lot of chaos, there's a lot of uncertainty, it's very stressful. And of course I loved my mom, and so it was
Mm,
hard to watch her be that way. And I also didn't feel very safe. I didn't have a lot of safety or maternal anything in my life growing up. But my dad is wonderful. My dad is my favorite human. When I was 10, I got to go to court and tell them I wanted to live with my dad, so I went to live with my dad from about 10 on. However, I was still involved with my mom, and I got to see all of the chaos that continued there. I did theater, I did musical theater in my teens, and that is something that I think really saved me. I really feel that the performance aspect of my life gave me something to look forward to. It kept me from doing drugs, it kept me from going down the same path that my mom was going down, that my sister has ultimately gone down.
oh,
But it really that chaos translated into mental illness in my adult life. And I also have a lot of mental illness in my genetics. So my mom was clearly very mentally ill. My grandpa had bipolar disorder. I've been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And so I didn't have a lot of healing tools. I didn't have a lot of the things that help you get through things. You know, some people have loving childhoods where they learn how to deal with things as adults, and I didn't really have that. So I drank a lot, and I just, I kind of went through life. I've always been a decently successful person. People are always surprised to find that I went through such a hard childhood because I am so put together. But
yes.
there was a breaking point, right? So all of that's the short condensed version that brought me to about 6 or 7 years ago when I got diagnosed bipolar. I was very depressed. I was suicidal. I got put on medication. And I always say this to my clients and on my podcast is that all of us, there's a breaking point where you are just tired of your own bullshit and it's time to change. And I was basically at my rock bottom. And I was just like, I cannot do this anymore. And this woman entered my life. Her name is Barbara. She is a homeopath, and she is still with me to this day. She calls herself my mom, or my second mom. My mom actually ended up passing away 14 years ago. She overdosed on
Oh,
oxycodone.
oh my
And so,
gosh, I'm so sorry to
and
hear
it's
that.
okay though. Like it was hard, but when it happened, it was really hard. But
Mm,
I almost felt relieved. It was weird. I was very sad, but at the same time, it was like my mom was so ill. She didn't want to be here. She had such a hard time being alive, and I felt this relief that she finally got to be free. So it's kind of this weird turning point in my life. But I, of course, was still in my own self hate, which we're going to get to about self love, self hate, all of that.
yes.
But Barbara calls herself my second mom. We believe that we were actually like mother-daughter in a past life. We've got this
Yeah.
beautiful connection. And she helped me get off of medication using homeopathic remedies, and she kind of catapulted me into my healing journey. And I feel like that is my turning point when I finally started to shift and change and slowly get to the version of myself that I am right now.
So when you were in that dark place prior to meeting Barbara, what was it that you were going through? Like
Um,
in terms of emotional, physical, psychological, were you aware you were in a dark place, or was it just, had it just become a way of life for you?
Maybe a little bit of both, actually. That's a really fascinating question because I think part of it was a way of life because I had been drinking a lot, right? So I was pushing down my emotions. I was doing all kinds of things to distract myself, but I also recognized how dark I was because I knew that there was mental illness in my family.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad really didn't know how to help me. And I would lay in bed and just stare at the wall for hours and just feel very empty and helpless. And I know people go through this. People don't talk about it, but there's a lot of people that go through these bouts of depression. And then I have bouts of mania. So because I'm bipolar, which I
Yes.
would love to talk about in greater depth if that ever comes up in this podcast, but I do believe
Yes.
it's manageable. Bipolar feels like a death sentence when you get it. It feels like you're crazy, but I really think it's just a matter of managing your emotions and learning different tools. And so
Mm-hmm.
at the time, though, my mania was very high. My lows were very low, and I had no set
So
center
there's
where I felt good
no middle ground.
at all, never
So
middle. It was
how old were you when you started to feel this mania and these highs and these lows?
I think I've always had it a little bit, which would make sense from the chaotic childhood. Like when I look back, I think a lot of it is nurture, some of it is nature, but I think a lot of it is just how I grew up. I noticed it a lot in my mid 20s. And then the turning point for me, I was probably like 29, 30 years old when I got diagnosed. And so I was just really, really high, really low. Alcohol does not help. And so it was just this constant trying to bring myself to center, but the wrong way because I didn't
Mhm.
have the tools.
Right. And what kinds of things, so other than alcohol and prior to meeting Barbara, were there other things that you were trying to do to help yourself?
I think I was I mean, I always exercised a lot. I've always been into fitness and
Mm-hmm.
exercise does help my mental state. However,
Mm-hmm.
we talked about this before the podcast. I have a very addictive personality. And like you were saying, a lot of performers, a lot of creatives, we have very addictive personalities. And so
Yes.
I was addicted to working out to the point where I would make myself sick. I would be addicted to dating. I'd go date a bunch of men and just have that be something that I focused on.
And that would make you sick if you dated a lot of bad men.
I, Absolutely,
How
yes.
many bad dates can one bear?
Yeah, and you can't, especially if you're not in a good mental state, you're like, oh, I
No,
can't
you would
handle
be
this.
attracting all those guys that you don't want in your life too.
That's a powerful thing to say too, because that's when you're that low,
Mm-hmm.
you're attracting low. You're not attracting the high energy people that you want to be around.
No, no, you're attracting those that are the worst type for you in that moment in time. And as a child, and maybe at that time where you started to feel that, life wasn't so great, you had all this trauma going on around you. Did you try to speak up? Did you ask for help? Was it something, did you feel silenced
That's
at that
something I come
time?
to realize in my adult life, because at the time, to be honest, a lot of my memories are very fuzzy from that time. I
Mm-hmm.
actually think that there's some suppressed memories that are trying to
Oh,
come out right now,
clearly. That,
right?
yes,
You have
yes,
to,
I
you
do
try to hide
understand.
yourself from it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back, I realized that my mom was so chaotic that I stayed very small so that I could be out of the way, so that I wouldn't get hurt, so that nobody would come bother me. So I would just stay tiny and try to keep her happy. And so I do think I did not have very much of a voice as a child.
Did you feel at that time in your life, obviously, you're trying to suppress your feelings, but did you ever feel like you're a victim, or did you feel angry, or did you feel shame, or like, I can't imagine what you must have been feeling going through all this?
Looking back, especially, like I hold a lot of shame. There's a lot of shame in my body. And I believe that I have a lot of shame from that time. There's a lot of guilt because you feel like it's my fault that mom is doing what she's doing. She used to do this thing. So my mom was really addicted to pills. She really liked
Mm-hmm.
Oxy and any painkillers. And so I was like 7, and she would sit down and just mix all of her pills into this big bottle and just take handfuls of pills and tell me all of her problems. And I was like 7 years old, and I was just like,
Oh.
I don't know. I'm sorry, mom. I love you. But so that instilled a lot of
Mm.
shame because she wanted me to help her, but I didn't have the capacity to help her. I was a child. So that definitely, made me have a smaller voice, made me stay inward because I felt so ashamed of just not being able to make it better.
I completely understand that. And I think with that comes a lot of responsibility. You were given way more responsibility than what you had the capacity for. And I had a childhood that was very similar, where my mum put a lot of responsibility on me as well. I was actually born with the job, which we won't go into now because this is about you. But my short story is that my mum was suffering from depression and was heading towards having a nervous breakdown. And the doctor suggested she have a baby to take her mind off herself. So
Oh,
my job was to keep my mum's mind off herself. So if ever anything went wrong, it was my fault. So my responsibility from the moment I was born was to take care of my mother. So I 100%
you
understand.
do.
It's that
Absolutely.
it's that sense of responsibility. I never felt shame though. I never felt shame, but I probably had a lot of fear. Did you have fear? Were you scared a lot of the time?
Yeah. Well, and there's fear because, we were constantly moving. We were in weird men's houses all the time. My mom also had a lot of sex in front of me. That
Oh
was a
my
very
God.
consistent thing. We,
Oh,
she met a man in a van, ended up being her third husband when I was like 6, and he lived in like a motel, and there were 2 beds side by side, and me and my sister were in one, and her and the man were in the other, and they just didn't care. She just had no
oh.
awareness of me at all. And so it was just, I don't know. My dad has more memories of it than I do. So he'll share things with me that I don't remember. Like our room had nothing on the walls. It was just a mattress on the floor. And we were also starved a little bit as children because she used all of the child support for alcohol. Like it was just a
Mm-hmm.
really chaotic thing. And I want the listeners to know that I do not feel sorry for myself at all. As I tell you this story, I have no regrets. I do not wish anything differently for me. I am not like, I do not feel sorry for myself. And so I tell them the story. They're like, oh my God, but it's not, it's okay. It's not bad.
Yes. Yeah. You know what? That is someone who is healed. When
Or
someone
healing. Or
when
healing.
someone has healed, they don't have regret, because you wouldn't be the person you are right now if you didn't go through all of that. I mean, you would be so resilient. You would have tenacity. You would have so many qualities that you wouldn't have had you not gone through all that.
Exactly.
But let's start talking about your healing journey and Barbara, because obviously she was the person that came into your life and that was the start of your turning point.
Yes. And so something that she did that was very completely invaluable is she held space for me, almost like she was my mother, which is something that it's funny because of what I went through. I've looked for a mother in almost every womanly person I've ever met. Like I always want other
Mm,
people's moms to adopt me. I always wanted that maternal energy. And so she
yes.
provided that. She really would she'd let me cry. She would let me feel my feelings, and she would put me on remedies. We actually got, so I was on lithium and Klonopin, which are 2 very serious drugs. And she got me the homeopathic versions of them. She sent them off to a lab. They created a homeopathic version, and I weaned myself off of medication that way.
That's
Really
incredible.
cool. It was
That's
amazing.
incredible. And listening to you talk about Barbara, I think what she did for you, she created a safe space for you. So it
Yes.
was not just the motherly instinct that you were looking for, but I think maybe you may have been looking for somewhere where you felt safe.
Yes. And I talk about that with my clients and on my podcast, is that most people are looking for a safe place. And when you start a
Mm-hmm.
healing journey, what you need is somebody who doesn't have any opinions about your life, or is
Yeah.
not going to try
No
to interject.
judgment.
No judgment, no
Mm-hmm.
advice, almost even. Like you almost just
Yes.
need somebody to hold space for you and let
Yes.
you process your life.
Yes. And allow you to speak and to have that voice.
Yes,
And
very much
and
so.
and all you want for them is to listen. And you want to be heard.
I want to be heard very much. And I wasn't heard for a long time. And so I know people probably feel the same way. I'm sure there's many people who struggle speaking up
Mm-hmm.
and feeling heard and feeling like their
Yes.
voice has a difference.
We've come across that in this podcast. It's amazing how many people go through a journey not like yours. I mean, your journey is extreme. You know, your story is one that I've not heard on this show
Oh,
before, but
really?
other people have. Yes, it's amazing how many people have been silenced and felt that they haven't had a voice in their lives. And so you've discovered yoga. Was that through
Yeah.
Barbara?
No, actually, I had taken yoga years before I met Barbara, and I actually did not like it the first time I took it. I thought it was super boring. I had a really hard time sitting with myself. I really wanted to run and move and distract myself. And I went to yoga and I was like, oh, I didn't like that at all. And then it was around the same time as Barbara, but she is not into yoga like I am. So I just
Right.
started taking it. So I used to be a competitive bodybuilder. And at
Oh
the
my
time,
gosh.
I know it's kind of a weird area of my journey, but addiction leads to stuff
Addiction.
like
I,
that.
I would say anyone
Yeah,
that does bodybuilding, that is your whole life. That becomes
had to be. I was
every
obsessed.
every second of your life is around bodybuilding.
Yes, it revolved around food and exercise, and I
Yes.
alienated everyone in my life. But at that
Mm-hmm.
time, I started taking yoga at the gym because I was like, oh, I need to stretch and I'm working so hard. And it's this is something I love to tell people. I didn't even realize that anything was happening because you go to yoga and part of yoga is you move with your breath. That's like the main thing is you breathe, and as you breathe, your body moves with your breath. And that is how you connect everything. And so I was going and I was doing it, and I'm like, oh, I just want to do the headstands and the hard stuff and whatever. But over time, it started to change me and I didn't even know. Like it just started to shift how I felt. And it was a very slow process, but eventually it led me to going into yoga teacher training. And that's kind of how I got into that.
Okay, I want to back a second here
Yeah.
because there may be people that don't actually know what yoga is,
Yes.
what it does, or what it's meant to do for you, and the origins of yoga. Can you just give us like a little like story about yoga?
Yeah. So, and I will say that I am not the best yoga historian, but yoga is rooted in ancient Indian practices and it has been around for thousands of years. Most people in the West believe that yoga is stretching. So they look at yoga, they're like, oh, you're just stretching. Like, I just think I'm going to go to yoga and stretch, and I'm not flexible. So I better not go to yoga. That's like what I hear almost all the time is that people are not flexible. So they go to yoga. So my advice
That
to you
could be me.
is that you?
That
Don't
could
you
be
do
me.
Pilates?
I do Pilates and I'm getting slightly better with my flexibility, but my balance is improving. So I have no balance due to vertigo.
Oh,
So I
that's
have,
right. We talked
yeah.
about that.
So I have problems with balance. I have problems with flexibility, and I'm always the most uncoordinated person in class. And where I go, they all know that I'm really what we say in Australia, unco. So, so the instructors are always keeping an eye out for me and making sure that my legs and my arms and everything is in the right place. And we have a laugh about it and they go, oh yeah, well, of course, it's Marissa. She's always the one that's a little bit all over the place with her moves. But anyway, this is about you.
No, but that's so actually, I love that you said that because that's the thing is in your head to you, your story, and also probably your truth is that you're uncoordinated. You have a hard time with balance. You have a hard time with flexibility. Something I like to tell people is it's called a yoga practice. It's also called a meditation practice. And there's a reason for that. It's not called a yoga perfect. So it is the practice of balance. It is the practice of flexibility. It is the practice of breath. And people, especially in the West, we expect ourselves to be so perfect when we go do something new.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the intention at all. Yoga is the ability to learn how to do those things. It teaches you how to do those things. And so for anybody who was scared of yoga, please don't be. It's not scary.
Yes. And I've been to yoga twice, and I have to
Okay,
share this.
please.
And well, both times I've gone to yoga, I've cried.
Uh-huh.
It's made me cry. And I figure if I'm paying people money to go and do something, I don't want to pay people to make me cry. No. So I kind of am a little bit scared to go back because I feel like I'm going to make a fool of myself if I sit there and I start crying. So I don't go.
As a teacher, I love it when my students cry because I
Oh,
know that they've hit something and that something has come out of them. And all of that pain that I just told you about, all of that childhood stuff has come out on my mat. So every healing opportunity, like how healed I am right now, I'm still healing. I will always be healing. But the amount of healed that I've become is because I was able to go to that safe place among my other healing modalities and cry and let it out and just feel, because our society, we don't feel our feelings. We push our
mm,
feelings down with alcohol, drugs,
mhm.
dancing, entertainment, movie. We have so many things that it's like, oh, you
Netflix
feel that. Yes, right.
and chocolate.
Exactly. And chocolate will do it. That's something else I could talk about forever is food and pushing down emotions. But we are taught in our society to push it away. So then when you sit with yourself in a yoga class, you've moved, you've breathed, you've connected, you're laying there in silence at the end, and everything bubbles up to the surface. Of course, you're going to cry. And it's a
Mm,
beautiful reaction. And no one is judging you. And if they are, that's their problem. That's not your problem.
yes. And you've just touched on something about disconnection. Not only are we disconnected from our emotions, but also too, don't you feel that we're getting to a point where we're starting to feel a disconnect with our own bodies?
Yes. And I have thoughts on that because I think that and I will keep a lot of my super opinionated things to myself, but I do believe that Western medicine has done us a disservice because
Mm-hmm.
they teach it that way. They say, oh, the mind and the body, they're separate. Like you're not feeling
Mm.
this in your leg because of your emotions. It's totally a separate, or like they will even say that your diet does not affect how your body feels, which is ridiculous because obviously the
Oh,
things you
yes,
eat
it does.
affect your body. Like,
Yes, it does.
and so we are very disconnected. We tend to see things as this is my body, this is my mind. They are not the same thing. But your mind literally, like I always use this as an example, but have you ever had to have like an uncomfortable conversation with somebody and you get a stomach ache or you like that sort of reaction in your body? Do you know what I'm
I
talking
do
about?
get reactions around people, weirdly enough. Some people I feel really tired after I've spent time with them. There are
Mm-hmm.
some people that I start to feel agitated within my body.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people that if I've had a bad experience with them previously, when I feel their presence coming close to me, I feel my body lock up.
Mm-hmm.
There's situations where I don't speak up and I get a sore throat.
Uh-huh.
Look, I could go on and on and on. Even if I have a sore, like a hip,
Mm-hmm.
it's on one side. It's me, to me, it is that I'm wanting to take a step forward, but something is holding me back. I have all these things.
Yeah.
I don't take any prescription drugs. I don't need any.
No.
And I don't even take painkillers because I found ways to remove pain, to
Without,
eradicate pain in my body without having to take anything.
I love
So,
that understanding.
yeah, so I'm hyper body aware and to the point, okay, I'm not an addictive personality, but but I am addicted to this. I have my phone and I set alarm triggers during the day, 4 or 5 times a day, where the alarm goes off. And that is my time to check in with my body and how I'm feeling
I
physically,
love that.
mentally, and emotionally. And I have words that I say to myself that as soon as I say those words, I go into an immediate sense of calm. But what I check in with, where are my shoulders? Are my shoulders up around my ear? How's my breath? How's my body feeling? Am I hunching over, which I tend to do if I feel that I'm carrying the world's weight on my shoulders? So
Absolutely.
yes, I
Beautiful.
absolutely 100% hear what you're saying, and I 100% agree. And it's a shame that people don't have that realization, because they're, to me, I believe they're not living their lives to the capacity and to the quality of life they could be living if they were more aware.
And they don't even know. Most people are not even
No.
aware of the lack of awareness, right? So they're just kind of, we come here and we think that things are happening to us, and we just kind of feel like the world is just throwing stuff at us and we're just reacting. And the cool,
Mm-hmm.
so go full circle back to yoga. That's one of those things that if you're hearing us talk about this right now and you're like, well, I don't know, have any awareness of my body, or I don't even know what that means. Yoga is a really good way to start to do that without even having to try. You don't have to do anything. You just go and you do the movement and you start to find that body awareness slowly over time.
There are different types of yoga, obviously, as there's different types of meditations, there's different types of foods, there's different types of everything in the world. Is there a particular practice that you believe would be a great one for people to start with? Or are there different ones that suit different people and their needs?
So this is there's so many different kinds that I'm not even familiar with, but there's some mainstream that I can share, and also ones that I teach that I've seen different levels of different people come into. And so one of my favorite things for beginners to do is restorative yoga, or
Mm-hmm.
yin yoga, which is a
Oh,
very, have you done yin?
yes, I have. And they actually teach that at my Pilates studio, and I want to go and do
Oh,
it there.
you should go, because it's so yin and restorative tend to be much slower. Like when I teach a restorative class, I'll teach 5 poses the entire hour. And so you bring in blankets and pillows and you get cozy and you stretch and you
Oh,
meditate. But some people struggle with that because their minds are so active. The first time I ever took a restorative class, I sobbed my eyes out because I couldn't sit still and I couldn't like be with myself. And so I'll see primarily men struggle with it. They're always very
mm-hmm,
fidgety and they're always moving around.
mm-hmm.
But that is a really beautiful practice for somebody who maybe doesn't feel like they want to do the athletic yoga, or maybe doesn't have that connection with it. So restorative and yin are very good for beginners. And then just depending, it's hard because a lot of studios call classes different things and they have names
Yes.
that are not like the yoga name. So then you're like, I don't even know what this is. Um, but if you see anything called like alignment, hatha based, things like that, that's going to be a little bit slower. You're going to get into the movement, you're going to feel your body, but you're not going to have to go so fast. And that's a good way for people who do like to move their bodies, who feel like they want to be a little bit more exercisey, because some people have very active minds. And that helps.
That's
Like for
me.
me, that's you.
Mm,
So,
mm.
and you like to work out. And so for me, like restorative was hard for me at first. I liked the really, really hard stuff because my mind was so active. I meditated when I was moving. And so for some
Yes,
people, that's
yes,
better.
yes. I
And
do
then
that.
you
Mm.
do that. Okay. So then there's vinyasa, power yoga, that sort of thing. I teach a lot of that. And in my power yoga classes specifically, I'm teaching arm balances and headstands and handstands and that sort of stuff. And so some athletes love that sort of thing. Some people look like you and they're like, no, thank you.
I
Um,
would fall on my head.
You'd be so, well, maybe with the vertigo, it might be bad for you, but you'd be surprised. I try to teach my students from a very loving place of just curiosity and
Mm.
knowing that you are working past your limits. So if anybody listens to your podcast and they come to my Instagram, you're going to see me standing on my head. You're going to see me balancing on my arms. You're going to see me doing some really cool stuff. But for me, it's not about showing off. It's more about going, what do I think my personal limits are? And then transcending that. And so that's like a
Mhm.
really cool practice for people that are interested in that. However, you don't have to do that to do yoga. There's also one more that I want to talk about that
Yes.
I'm really afraid of. I don't go because I'm
Oh,
scared of it. It's called Kundalini, and it is so emotional and so vocally challenging that I avoid it because I'm scared of what's going to come out.
okay.
You should look
So
into, I feel like you might like Kundalini.
Okay, so what do you do in that class? Why is it what do you do that's vocal in that class?
Well, so there's a couple different ones. So some Kundalini, there's one called Kundalini of sound, and it's a lot of chanting and a lot of really strong breathing. And you do, it's more,
Oh,
it's not, you do a little bit of movement, but it's not the same at all as like what you see with my Instagram. It's a lot of seated meditation, a lot of chanting, and there's just, so there's something called the Kundalini is in this theory, in this school of thought for yoga, is an energy coil at the base of your spine, and it goes all the way up through your head. And when you do kundalini, you activate that coil and it brings everything up and out of your body. So if you're holding trauma, which I am, and I have some that I'm scared to look at, some people
yes,
feel that way, like I don't want
yes,
to, I think there's sexual trauma in there that I've pushed down, and I'm
yes.
waiting for it to show itself to me, and I'm very
Mm-hmm.
scared of it.
Yes,
But chanting as a singer, something you might really enjoy, and it might feel really
mm-hmm.
good to you, and it might be
Yes.
something that you're like, I don't have to balance on my head, and I can sit here and do this meditation and chant and use the vibration of my voice, and it's actually a really beautiful practice.
So listening to everything that you've just said, what would you, and talking about yoga in the way that you're speaking about it, people may feel that, okay, what are the connections between yoga and spirituality? Some people may think this is all woo woo. This is too woo woo for me. I'm a very black and white person. So, what are the connections then to spirituality, or is that something that may not necessarily be for you? You don't have to go down that spiritual path.
That is such a good question, and it's going to be a very complicated answer because all teachers are different.
Right,
And depending on, so studios, yoga studios tend to be a little bit more on the spiritual yoga side. They tend to focus on all the different limbs of yoga, not just the movement. If you do yoga at a gym, they're likely only doing the breath and movement. If you do yoga anywhere other than a studio, it is likely to be a little bit less spiritual.
right.
However, I will say I'm a more spiritual teacher. I'll come in and I'll say my things and I'll talk about the universe and God and all this stuff. However, it is intended to be a very personal experience. So to me, the difference between spirituality and religion is dogma, and that sort of dogmatic ideas about religion having to be a certain way. And if you are of a certain religion, you believe these things, and that is the end all be all. In yoga, yes, we talk about Hindu gods. Yes, we talk about different things, but they're all open for interpretation. My teacher always says, God as you understand God, or inside, like it's always about how you understand and interpret it. So it's very open,
Okay.
but you have to be open minded to it. And some
Okay.
people who are religious don't like it.
So when you're talking about God or Hindu or any of those things, basically, and you're saying it's you're leaving it for people to interpret as they wish to interpret. But
Yes,
ultimately, what you're saying is you're it symbolizes something higher than yourself.
correct. And sometimes higher than yourself within yourself. So that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
my teacher, she explains it in a beautiful way, like Christ consciousness. So not necessarily Jesus Christ, but Christ consciousness within the body, that Kundalini, the Mother Mary, it's all inside. And that's kind of how I see it. But I don't sit there in front of my class and tell them this is what the book of yoga says and you have to follow it. No, I'm like, here's some stuff that I feel that I would like to bring into my teaching. And if you take it, awesome. If you don't, that's okay. You can kind of take it or leave it. It's very easy to cherry pick in yoga the things that work for you.
Yes. Okay. Now, I'd like to start going through some of your processes that
Okay.
you went through and some of the things that I know that you address. And one of them is you would have had to go through a journey of forgiveness. And this is something that I tend to find a little difficult. My mantra almost is I forgive, but I don't forget. And
Mm,
but being Sicilian, I come from a Sicilian family. We've it's almost in our DNA that we don't forgive, and I find it very hard to forgive. We tend to, and at times it's like, don't get mad, get even. And I always jokingly say, you know, I have the violin case in the boot of my yeah of my black car, and
Oh God.
yeah, right, or cement shoes in the Pacific Ocean will take care of that problem. No, I'm not like that.
No, but I
Yeah,
understand what you're
but you
saying.
understand, it's that Sicilian thing. How do you forgive? What's your take on forgiveness? Because you would have had to do a lot of forgiving. How did you forgive, and how can we forgive when people don't offer an apology?
I would love to share something that I just noticed about what you just said. And I say
Yes.
that from the biggest place of love, that you have these stories that you've already decided about yourself. So your stories are, I'm Sicilian, we don't forgive well, I don't really forgive well. You've got these things that you tell yourself, and they become true because you continue to live them. And I don't have that particular one, but I've got other things that I've told myself for a very long time that became true because I continued to tell myself them. Like
Mm-hmm.
mine, I'm a serial dater. I'm always breaking men's hearts. And so I'm never going to find somebody, blah, 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 blah. That was my story for a very long time. And I just recently broke that. So something, a disservice that you and maybe other people that are listening that identify with what you're saying, which is I find it really hard to forgive people. And how can you forgive people if they haven't apologized to you? And how can I forget what they did to me? That is a story that I would say you'd want to work on within yourself a little bit first, just by acknowledging it, because the work is very different for everybody. But that aside, one important thing to remember is that the forgiveness is not for the other person. You are not letting some asshole off the hook for hurting you. My
Yes.
mom did some really bad stuff. My
Mm-hmm.
mom did some terrible things. I've had other people do terrible things. And when I forgive them, it's not like I'm like, oh, well, you didn't do anything bad. It's okay. No, I'm forgiving them because I don't want to hold on to that bullshit for the rest of my life. Like that's what my sister is the exact opposite of me. She is very unhealed. She is very angry. She is very upset all the time. And my mom is the source of all of her anger. And my mom has been dead for 14 years. And I'm looking at her going,
Wow.
do you really want to let a woman who left Earth 14 years ago continue to make your life miserable? The forgiveness is not for my mom. The forgiveness is for you. I mean, it's for you to feel better. So if somebody hurts you, just remember that that is their own shit. That is their own unhealed. I said this on a podcast last week. I really look at everybody like we are unhealed children just walking around in adult bodies. And so everybody you meet has some crap that they went through that they're trying to process that they maybe don't have tools for. So sometimes when people hurt you, it's not really intentional. They're just trying to figure out their little human suit and trying to figure out what's
Mm.
going on. And so just remember that the forgiveness is not for them. It is for you. And do you really want to let somebody who hurt you continue to rule the way that you live your life?
Mm. And in relationships too, often when people speak to us or they do something, it's their own stuff that's that's talking. It's not them, it's their stuff. And
Mhm.
sometimes when they hurt you, it's not them, it's their stuff. And that's kind of the way that I've tried to process things.
Does it help you?
Yes, it does, because it helps me understand the person, and it helps me understand that they must be really hurting
Yes.
to have the capacity to do that kind of thing, to engage in that kind of behavior. They must be coming from a really dark place, and how sad for them.
Yes, and that's what I think about with my mom. When I look back on my mom now, and I've done a lot of forgiveness work with her after she passed away. So I have conversations with her, and I've done a lot of that work after she's gone. I just know she was in a lot of pain and she was very
Mm,
sick, and all the things that she did, like my mom loved me. She just was really not well. And so why wouldn't I forgive her?
yes.
Why? Why would I
And
hold on to that?
then why do they slip into a victim mentality? And then other people find their way out of that. They are not victims at all. Because you've had all this stuff happen to you. I've had stuff happen to me in my life, as we've talked about. And I've never felt a victim. And I have not a lot of tolerance for victims.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we're all born the same
Mm-hmm.
when it's all said and done. But we all process things differently. So
Mm-hmm.
is it the environment that we grow up in that affects the way that we react?
I have lots of thoughts on this, but I think I always say that it is much more nurture than it is nature. I feel like it's 80% nurture and maybe 20% nature, but I also think that I believe in reincarnation. So I think many of us chose to be here, and some of us have been here more times than others. And so some of us are having a more victimized experience because that's just the age of our soul, and that's just how we chose to come down. Um, but also I actually acted like a victim for a while. So I will claim that I had victim mentality for quite some time, and we gained something from it. We have learned through our victim mentality that we will get bailed out of situations, or that we will get comfort, or that we will get, oh, I'm sorry, or we'll get something from it. And
Mm,
that is easier to continue to do that than it is to grow and find out what it's like to take responsibility and see what's on the other side, because it is much better over here. But when you're on that other side, you don't know that. So you're not sure what it's going to look like to go, oh, everything in my life is my responsibility. But once you take that responsibility, everything is better. But when you're on the
so
victim side,
much. Yeah.
you don't know. You
Yes.
don't know what it's like.
Yes. And that was an interesting comment you made about reincarnation and that we choose to be here, because it's what I've found in life is that things happen to people who can deal with them most of the time. We're given what we can deal with.
I agree.
And I mean, I see some people have massive reaction if they break a fingernail, and their reaction would be the same as if their animal died. You know,
Exactly.
like and I just go, and then there's other people that really can endure so much and don't have the reaction of the person that just broke the fingernail.
Yep.
So I think we're all kind of given what we can bear.
I
So that
agree.
equates with what you're saying, but I've never thought about it that way.
It's just a thought. It's just an idea I have. I
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, yeah. And so, what have you learned about yourself through this whole journey? What are the things you've learned the most about yourself?
But I don't know anything. That's the most beautiful thing about this whole process, is that I've learned so much and I still don't know anything. And I think that as long as I'm an open conduit for love, my life gets better. And I've learned that victim mentality does not serve me. And I still have it in places. I can still see it sometimes. I'm like, oh, there's a little corner there where I still have that. Let me go ahead and work on that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've learned a lot. So that's kind of a loaded question. It just kind of depends on where you want me to take it.
Yes, yes. Okay, but your initial response was that I know nothing. So to me, I would interpret that as that learning for you is going to be a lifelong journey.
Always.
And
And
now,
that's what oh, sorry. That's what I tell my clients too, because I'll have
mhm.
self-love clients that are like, oh, 12-week coaching, we're going to get to the end and it's going to be this amazing thing. I'm like, nope, I am just literally one step on your ladder up to the next thing. Like it's just
Mhm.
the people that are, I feel like, doing the best in life and feeling the best in life are the ones that are comfortable with being uncomfortable, and just know that there is no destination. Just enjoy it. Just
Mhm.
let yourself heal, let yourself feel shit. It's okay. Like, don't feel like you have to get anywhere.
And also learning that the more you learn, the more you realize, the less you know.
Yes. Absolutely. That exactly.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
less, yes.
Now you are a self-love coach. So can you tell our listeners what it is that a self-love coach does?
I believe we're all different, and I'm kind of a self-proclaimed self-love coach. So it's much more, I'm not like a certified coach, and you don't have to be certified to be a coach.
Mm-hmm.
However, I basically use yoga and meditation as my two main modalities to help you get to a deeper sense of self-love. And I like to tell this on all the podcasts I've been on lately and on my platform. When I
Yes.
talk about self-love, I mean it a lot more in a sense of self-discovery. So we tend to think that self-love is like bubble baths and cups of tea and, taking care of yourself. I think of that as self-care. What I do is I have like a 12-week module program that I take people through that teaches them to connect with their inner child, that teaches them to forgive past experiences, that teaches them to go into the parts of themselves that need to be looked at, that teaches them body awareness. It's a comprehensive yoga, meditation, and like journaling, module program that gets to all these different ways that I've learned in my experience how
Mm-hmm.
to come to who I am, love myself better, and show up for myself more consistently.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that people nowadays don't love themselves? They don't take care of themselves. Do you feel that there's a lot of self-loathing almost?
There is a lot of self-loathing, and it's kind of what's the word? Like subconscious. A lot of people
Mm,
don't even know they have it. So they do things from a place of self-loathing. So I'm not judging anyone, but I think a lot of the time, like modern dating, like we do things that are just out of that need for immediate satisfaction because we've got a part of ourselves that needs that validation or that needs that sort of quick somebody give me that affection. And that's really from a place of self-loathing, because when you honor yourself and you honor your body, you're not going to just accept anyone. And I'm saying that because I used to do that all the time. So I'm not
yes,
judging. I've totally been there.
yes,
And for some
yes.
people, they're very empowered in that. And some people are empowered, and that's great. But there are so many facets of our lives, whether it be zoning out and watching a show on Netflix for 12 hours. That is not really coming from a place of self-love. That's coming from a place of I want to check out because I don't like myself and I don't want to spend time with myself. And so what can I do to distract me from me? There's so much of that going on in our society. And so, yes, I do think a lot of people don't like themselves very much.
So when you talk about checking out, then would you suggest that meditation is the best way to check in?
One of the best ways. I know that some people feel very intimidated by meditation. So, something I would like to say is that I tell all of my students, and this is my opinion, and there are things to back this up, that it is not so much about stopping your mind, because people sit down to meditate and they're like, my mind won't shut up. I can't meditate. I just can't. It's not about stopping your mind. It's just about learning how to coexist with your mind and change your point of focus. So all you have to do is just focus on your breath, and your brain's going to blah, 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 blah the whole time. And every time you hear something, you go, okay, that's cool. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And that's all you have to do. And that brings you back to center. It regulates your nervous system. It softens all the outside noise. But other ways are getting in nature, putting your feet in the grass, quieting down in any way that you can is enough to check in. You don't have to meditate. It's one of the best ways, but
Mm,
it is not the only way.
yes, I have a full on morning ritual. So I wake up 2 hours before I have to leave the house.
I love that.
Yes. So I first thing I do is I meditate, generally 10 to 15 minutes. And I'm one of these people that I have a really busy mind, and I've learned not to be judgmental. If I'm having all these thoughts, quite often I'm finding the answers to the things that I need solutions to. And and then there's other times where I finally in the last minute 2 minutes of the meditation I go into that place where I switch off, and that's okay, but it's always to be non-judgmental. I That's my
Yes,
approach.
I agree.
Then I do some planking, and that's my way of moving my body. I do 6 minutes of planking, and because I believe motion is lotion.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have a niggle, it always gets rid of the little niggle, no matter what is going on in my body. That planking helps me tremendously to alleviate any tension, any pain, anything that's going on anywhere. And then I write in a gratitude journal. So
Yes.
I feel that by doing those things, it's topping me up. Like I have a full tank and I'm ready to hit the day, and I get to work and I'm usually, yo, how are you going? And I'm really loud and I'm happy, and people go, oh my gosh, like you're always in this really good mood. How do you have this energy? And I just say, it takes work.
Mm-hmm. It does.
It
It takes.
takes work. But why do people so busy working on everyone else, but they're not working on themselves? And if you're not good for yourself, how can you be good for others?
What you said was so good. Your tank is full, so then you can go into work and you can be happy. And that's, you see it with moms all the time. You see it with people who work 50 hours a week. They're just giving, 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 or like you said, performers and
Mm-hmm.
teachers and everything. You're
Singing
just
teachers, yes.
singing teachers. And even as a yoga teacher, I found when I first started teaching yoga, I ignored my practice for a while because I was so focused on teaching others, and I got depleted really, really quickly. And so I have to make time for my own spiritual practice, or else I'm not a very good teacher. So people just, we also, our society does us a very big disservice because they teach us that you can drink a cup of coffee, take some pills, do something to get yourself to go all peppy, and you just
Mm,
basically put band-aids on things that
yes.
need to be looked at.
Well, the problem with the band-aid is it's always got to come off.
Exactly. And then it's worse
It's
than it was.
worse. You have a festering sore underneath. Band-aids don't work.
No, they don't. And that's what we do a lot. And it's
Do
unfortunate.
you have a self-care regime?
I'm kind of similar to you without the planking. I'm like, I don't want to plank in my
Yeah,
self-care.
but you have
But
these
I go,
weird stretches that you do
I do
probably.
weird stretches. Yes. So I go into my meditation room. I meditate for, well, actually, I open the space with my singing bowl and I clear my energy with my quartz, and then I pull cards and I kind of talk to my spirit guides with my cards, and then I journal, and then I meditate for 10 to 15 minutes. And usually when I'm meditating, I'm stretching, which I really like. Because I've got a lot of pain in my body because I push my body a lot, and I need to stretch and I need to soften. Lately I've been rolling on some tennis balls because my spine is really tight, so I'll roll on the balls and I'll meditate. And then gratitude, I definitely do like a gratitude list or an affirmation list. And then sometimes I like to chant because I also sing, and so I enjoy using my voice to connect to God and to spirit. So
That's amazing. If you had to suggest just one thing, just say we have a listener who doesn't do any of this stuff. There's no self-care regime. They're busy people, but they're finding their tank is running low, or it's just about on empty or on empty. What's one practice that you think would really benefit them?
I would say set a timer for 10 minutes. Don't have any expectation of meditation or anything, but just get your phone away from you and sit with yourself for 10 minutes. And if you want to be sitting outside, if you want to be having a cup of tea, if you want to be doing something, but spend 10
Mm,
minutes with yourself every day.
yeah.
Just get to that, because really for a lot of us, we're not used to showing up for ourselves. So it's very hard. Like you and I just described these practices that we have, but I bet you it took both of us a lot of time to create that as a daily habit. It took me a
Oh,
while to
yes.
show up for myself.
Yes. Yes, it
Yeah,
did. And it mostly people don't start creating habits that serve them
exactly.
because until they run into trouble. And I'm
Exactly.
guilty of that too.
Me too. Very
Yeah.
much so.
I had to be in a lot of I was in a lot of trouble physically, mentally, emotionally when I started all this. And I knew I had to find a way out. And that's
And a
how
lot of people get to that point before they do it, and that's okay. That's the thing too, is if you're listening right now and it's going to take you to get to that point to get there, that's okay. That's the way that our bodies and spirit works. It's, we're here having this experience, and you will get there when you get there. And your body will tell you. That's how we get sick. That's how we have disease, is because we push our bodies so hard and we don't show up and we don't take care of ourselves, and eventually your body is screaming and it will tell you. And you
hmm
can choose now to try before your body starts screaming. And if you want to do that, just set a timer, 10 minutes a day. Don't expect anything. Just be quiet. That's honestly the biggest thing. Be quiet. Listen.
Yes.
We spend so much
Yes.
time talking. We spend so much time doing. We need to listen.
And you were saying before about you singing.
Mhm.
Do you believe that there are benefits for singers when it comes to yoga practice?
Yeah, so the breathing thing is really powerful, and I will say, because it sucks as a singer. I have a breathing issue that I've had for 15 years. I cannot breathe fully. Sucks as a yoga teacher too. But the breathing practices are helpful. And then also the chanting, vibration in chanting is very powerful. So from a very woo-woo standpoint, if you're trying to manifest things in your life and you're trying to create things and you put your intentions behind your voice, it is much stronger than if you're just thinking them. So you think them, they're powerful. You sing them, they're even more powerful. The universe
Really?
is going to respond to you. Yes, that's
Yes,
my belief.
because one of the things that I say, well, I've been saying in leading up to some of the most recent episodes, I talk about manifestation, and I say whatever word you use after I am is what you will manifest in your life.
Yes,
Mm.
very
Okay,
much.
so we're just about to wind up. I have a couple more questions for
Okay.
you. This has been amazing. What are you up to now? What's what are you doing in terms of work, in terms of your business? What's happening with you?
It's funny because I was working with a coach that didn't suit me, and I was pushing really hard, and I was like on Instagram all the time, and I was doing, and it didn't feel good. I felt very out of alignment. I felt like I wasn't offering the best part of myself. So I've actually been going inward a lot, spending a little bit more time getting into alignment and getting myself a little bit more spiritually ready to give to the people that are ready to have what I have to say. And so I'm shifting a bit more into being more serious about my podcast because that is my favorite place to be. And I feel like I have a lot to say. So I'm spending a lot more time in the podcast. And then I'm creating a course. I'm going to create an online course, a 3-month online course that gets into a lot of the stuff that I just talked about. So a self-paced course that you can do where you can go through all these different modules where you're learning different yoga exercises, where you're learning different chants, where you're learning different meditations, where you're learning how to forgive, how to connect with your inner child, all this cool stuff. So I'm going to have this big program. It's going to take me a while to create it, but that's something I'm
Yes.
working.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And if you had to give our listeners one piece of advice based on your experiences, based on your knowledge, where you're at in life now, what would that be?
Kind of what you were saying in your morning routine is without the judgment. I think that on any journey, when you start to realize that there are things that need to be healed, we tend to come at it from a very judgmental place, and we tend to feel very ashamed of the things that we've done or the things that we're not doing the way we want to. And anytime that you're going to start looking at yourself, do it with as much love as you possibly can. I try to, that'd be the easiest thing for me to say is that I know it's hard. I know there's parts of you, like I look back on some of the things I've done and I'm like, oh God, that's ew. But I have to look at that with love because it got me to where I am. So if you're looking
Mm.
at yourself and you want to heal something, do it with love. Know that you are an unhealed child in an adult body and you're just trying to figure it out. You're just doing your best. You are where you are, and just do it with as much love as you possibly can.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool. So,
Thank you.
so cool. Okay, Jen, well, look, we're going to share your links in the show notes to your website and where people can find you, to your podcast. And so if people want to learn more about you, they just have to check out the show notes. We wish you all the very best and hope 2022 is the most amazing year for you. And thank you so much for being on our show. Really appreciate your time.
I loved it. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
having
Take it easy.
you too.
Bye.